It was 5:42 p.m. when I pulled into my driveway and realized something was horribly wrong. My keys were in my hand, my duffel bag still slung over my shoulder from an early return flight, and there was a car I didn't recognize parked right in front of my garage. At first I thought maybe a delivery driver had pulled into the wrong house until I looked through the living room window. A woman I had never seen in my life was walking around my home phone held high streaming live like she owned the place. My antique coffee table was in the background. My leather recliner was right behind her. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Family photos of her, framed and sitting on my mantle, where pictures of my parents used to be. Before I could process any of it, a voice snapped me back. Step away from the house. I turned and saw Linda Thompson, our HOA president, striding toward me with a clipboard and a neon vest that read, "Crisis Response," like she was leading some emergency drill. Except this wasn't a drill. She had her phone out calling 911, shouting that a dangerous stalker had found his victim. I opened my mouth to explain, but she drowned me out, screaming for help as if I were some kind of predator on her street. 8 months before that humiliating scene on my front porch, I made what I thought was a simple, reasonable complaint. Our quiet lakeside community in Montana had strict architectural guidelines for a reason to keep property values stable and maintain the rustic charm that drew us all here in the first place. But Linda Thompson, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, decided those rules didn't apply to her. She painted her entire house a blinding shade of electric blue, like something out of a Miami Beach postcard. It wasn't just an eyesore, it was a full-on assault against everything this neighborhood stood for. I'm a software engineer. I like clean lines, order systems that make sense. Seeing that blue monstrosity every morning made my skin crawl. So I did what any responsible homeowner would do. I filed a formal complaint. Nothing dramatic, nothing personal. Just a simple request to enforce the same rules everyone else had to follow. I figured it would be handled quickly. She'd repaint, life would go on. I couldn't have been more wrong. When the board voted in my favor, Linda was furious, but she hid it well at first. Outwardly, she smiled, nodded, and agreed to comply. She even apologized publicly during the HOA meeting, though I could see the stiffness in her jaw as she promised to make things right. A month later, her house was back to an approved neutral shade, and I thought that was the end of it. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly have imagined, was that repainting her house cost her nearly $18,000, money she didn't have. What I also didn't know, she'd been teetering on the edge of bankruptcy long before my complaint. That meeting didn't just embarrass her, it shattered her reputation. Her so-called friends whispered behind her back, questioning how someone who ran the neighborhood couldn't manage her own finances. And in that moment, I became her scapegoat. For months, Linda played the part of the gracious neighbor. She waved when I drove by, complimented my landscaping, even brought over a plate of lemon bars one Saturday. I almost felt guilty for reporting her. She seemed genuinely eager to move past the incident. Meanwhile, she was studying me like a hawk. My travel patterns, my routines, the weeks I spent in Seattle working with clients. She knew my lakeside cabin sat isolated at the very edge of the community, out of sight from most neighbors. Perfect for what she had in mind. Her revenge plan was brutal in its patience and its precision. The woman inside my house today, Scarlett Myers, wasn't some random squatter. Linda had been grooming her for months. Scarlett had just gone through a nasty divorce, was drowning in credit card debt, and desperate for a lifeline. Linda sold her a story so compelling, so righteous, that Scarlett believed every word. "You'd be helping other women," Scarlett, Linda likely told her. "We're creating a safe network for survivors of domestic abuse. Ethan's cabin. He's hardly ever there. It's the perfect place for you to rebuild your life in peace." And Scarlett bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. By the time I left for Seattle, the groundwork was already laid. Linda had staged photos of Scarlett with fake bruises, makeup, so realistic even I might have believed it. She fabricated therapy notes, police reports, medical records documenting years of supposed abuse by an unnamed ex-husband. She even created a social media persona for Scarlett as a strong, recovering woman sharing her healing journey. I had no idea that while I was sipping overpriced lattes in Seattle, another woman was moving into my home and turning it into her personal stage. I found out the hard way. The moment I stepped onto my porch, everything felt wrong. The curtains were different. There were potted plants by the window, plants I'd never owned. Through the glass, I saw my cabin's rustic furniture replaced by boho chic decor, my refrigerator stocked with organic almond milk and kale smoothies. And then there were the photographs, Scarlett smiling with friends framed and proudly displayed on my mantle, like she'd been there for years. I was still processing that when Scarlett spotted me through the window. The shift on her face was Oscar-worthy. One second she was cheerful and confident chatting to her live audience. The next she was pure terror, eyes wide, lips trembling as she screamed into her phone, "He's here! Oh my God, he found me!" She didn't just call anyone, she called Linda. Minutes later, Linda came barreling down the street like a wannabe SWAT commander, wearing that ridiculous vest with crisis response in bold print. Clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, she started yelling loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear 911. "Yes, we need immediate assistance." The stalker found her. "He's threatening her right now." I tried to speak to explain, but she drowned me out, shouting over me like her life depended on it. Meanwhile, Scarlett was sobbing so convincingly that for a moment, even knowing the truth, I almost believed her performance. That was the instant I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a neighborly feud gone too far. This was something much darker, an ambush designed to destroy me. And judging by the look on Linda's face, she was savoring every second. When the patrol car rolled up, I felt a wave of relief. Surely this would all get cleared up in minutes. I had my driver's license, property, deed, mortgage documents, everything. This was my home. There was no way a trained officer would mistake me for a criminal on my own property. Officer Daniels stepped out tall and stone-faced, his hand resting on his holster. "Sir, step away from the house," he ordered, voice flat and authoritative. I lifted my hands instinctively. "Officer, this is my cabin. I can show you proof." "Step away from the house," he repeated louder this time. Linda was already in his ear, spinning her tale like she'd rehearsed it 100 times. "She's terrified," Linda said breathlessly, gesturing to Scarlett, who was peeking out from behind the curtain like a scared rabbit. "He's been stalking her for weeks. This is the third time he's tried to break in." "That's a lie," my voice cracked with desperation. "I've never even seen this woman before today." But Daniels wasn't looking at me. He was watching Scarlett, who was now sobbing into her phone, whispering something about not wanting to die. The performance was flawless. If I didn't know better, I'd have believed her myself. "Sir, turn around and place your hands on the hood," Daniel said. I froze. "You can't be serious. Now." His tone left no room for argument. The next thing I knew, my palms were pressed against cold metal, and he was frisking me like I was some violent offender. My heart was hammering so hard it hurt. I wanted to scream, to tell him to check the deed, call the county records office, anything, but he wasn't listening. Instead, Daniels listened to Linda. She handed over a folder thick with papers, her voice dripping with concern. "Officer, you need to understand, Ethan has a history of targeting strong women. We've had complaints before. The HOA has documented everything." I twisted my neck to look at her. "Are you insane? That's my cabin." She ignored me completely, lowering her voice just enough to make it sound serious. "He's unstable. Obsessed. We've tried to help him before." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but the look on Daniel's face killed any humor. He was buying it. Hook, line, and sinker. And then came the nail in my coffin. Scarlett stepped out onto the porch, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Her voice shook, her breath came in ragged gasps. "Please, don't let him hurt me again." Again. That one word sealed my fate. By the time Daniels finished his assessment, I was being escorted off my own property like a dangerous predator. No cuffs, but close enough his hand hovered near his weapon the entire time. "You can fight this in court," he said as I sat in my truck, humiliated and shaking. "But for now, you need to stay 500 feet away. There's a temporary protection order in place." What? "It's for her safety," he said firmly. "If you violate it, you're going to jail." I stared at him in disbelief. "I own that house." He didn't flinch. "Then you better get a lawyer." When I pulled out of that driveway, everything I thought I knew about justice shattered. But the nightmare was just beginning. By the time I reached a cheap motel 30 miles away, my phone was blowing up. Texts from coworkers, emails from clients, notifications I couldn't keep up with. My stomach dropped as I opened social media. There she was, Scarlett, front and center in a viral video titled "Escaping My Stalker." Her face streaked with tears, her voice trembling as she told the world how she barely escaped the man who terrorized her for years. 500,000 views in less than 12 hours. A flood of comments calling me a monster. People demanding my arrest, my execution. Stay strong, sister. Why isn't this creep in jail yet? This is why women don't feel safe. My name. Ethan Cole was trending for all the wrong reasons. There were hashtags, memes. My LinkedIn profile had been bombed with hate comments. Someone even dug up my company photo and plastered it across Twitter with the caption, "Predator on the loose." It was like watching my life disintegrate in real time, one notification at a time. The HOA wasn't just a neighborhood nuisance anymore. This was organized, coordinated. And as I sat in that grim motel room, staring at my reflection in the cracked mirror, a sickening thought hit me. Linda didn't just want revenge. She wanted me erased. I didn't sleep that first night at the motel. I just lay there on the rock-hard mattress staring at the stained ceiling while the hum of the old AC unit rattled in the background. Every few minutes, my phone buzzed with another notification, comment, shares, angry emojis from strangers who now believed I was some kind of monster. By morning, the story had exploded. Scarlett's video had crossed 1 million views. National blogs were picking it up. Local Montana woman bravely escapes abusive stalker. My face was everywhere and the hate was pouring in like a tidal wave. I called an attorney. The consultation felt like stepping into a deeper pit of hell. "You're looking at a minimum of 6 months before a hearing," she said matter-of-factly, tapping her pen against a legal pad. Domestic violence laws prioritize victim safety. The system errs on the side of caution. Even when the victim is lying, I asked, my voice cracking. She gave me a pitying look. Proving that is almost impossible without overwhelming evidence. And the legal fees, 15 grand just to start. I left her office numb. My savings couldn't cover that kind of fight, not with my mortgage and the mounting damage to my career. My company had already called Ethan, maybe take some personal leave until this blows over. Translation, you're toxic. Stay away. I drove aimlessly for an hour past the snow-dusted pines and frozen lake, wondering how my life had imploded in less than 48 hours. By the time I stopped at a small grocery store to grab something, anything to eat, I felt like a ghost moving through a world that no longer wanted me. That's when I heard a voice behind me. "Cole." I turned ready to defend myself, expecting another accusation. Instead, I saw Robert Hayes, retired detective, 20 years on the force, the guy everyone in the neighborhood called when they needed advice about home security or whether a noise in the woods was a bear or a raccoon. "Robert," I said, trying to sound normal and failing. He studied me with eyes that had seen too much. "Something about this whole thing doesn't sit right with me." For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. We sat in his old Ford truck in the parking lot while I told him everything, the live stream, the cops, the restraining order, the viral video. He listened without interrupting, just nodding slowly, his jaw tightening with each detail. "Ethan," he said finally, "I've handled real domestic violence cases. There are patterns you learn to recognize, things victims do and don't do. This doesn't fit." That sentence hit me like a lifeline. Someone believed me. Robert leaned closer. "First step, gather evidence. Not just feelings, not just words. Hard facts. Dates, times, digital footprints. If this is a setup, there'll be cracks in their story." And just like that, my perspective shifted. I stopped feeling like prey and started thinking like a problem solver, the way I approach complex code bugs. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was going to debug this entire situation line by line until I found the truth. I checked into a different motel under a fake name. Then I opened my laptop and got to work. Scarlett had been posting, constantly milking her 15 minutes of fame. I downloaded every video, every Instagram story, every TikTok she'd made since the day she escaped. Then I cross-referenced her post with my travel receipts, timestamps from my credit card statements, my flight itineraries. The inconsistencies started popping like red flags in a sea of code. She claimed she'd been living in fear for 3 weeks, but one post showed her gushing about a new coffee shop in town that had opened only 10 days ago. In another, she mentioned her favorite hiking trail, except the trail had been closed for maintenance until last Thursday. She was sloppy, and I was going to use that. But the more I dug, the darker it got. Scarlett's social media painted a picture of someone deeply embedded in the community, chatting with locals, name-dropping businesses, posting photos at spots only residents would know. This wasn't improvisation. It was a script. A script someone had drilled into her until it felt second nature. And then I found something that chilled me, Linda, commenting on nearly every post. Always supportive, always reinforcing Scarlett's narrative. Stay strong. We've got your back. To the outside world, it looked like a concerned neighbor helping a survivor. To me, it looked like a handler managing her asset. Meanwhile, the online mob wasn't slowing down. Someone leaked my work email. Death threats started coming in. One message burned into my brain. You don't deserve a trial. We'll handle this ourselves. That's when Robert called. We need to meet, he said, his voice low. I think I found something. And it's big. My hands were shaking when I hung up. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something stronger than fear, anger, and beneath that something else, the certainty that this wasn't just Linda settling a score. This was bigger, organized, calculated, and I was about to find out just how deep the rabbit hole went. Robert didn't waste time on small talk when I slid into the passenger seat of his truck that night. The cab smelled faintly of coffee and old leather, and his laptop was open on the center console, glowing in the dark. I pulled some old case files, he said without looking at me. And what I found, you're not the first. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? He turned the screen toward me. A headline stared back, Local Man Loses Cabin After DV Accusations. Forced Sale Amid Restraining Order. The date was barely a year old. Another file popped up, then another. Each case eerily similar: homeowner goes away on businesswoman moves in claiming domestic abuse. HOA backs her story, legal nightmare ensues. They all gave up, Robert said grimly. Couldn't afford the fight. Ended up selling their properties at half value. Guess who bought them? I didn't need to guess. Linda. He nodded. Through shell companies. I checked the property records. After each incident, the HOA board arranges a private sale. Every single time. A chill crawled up my spine. This wasn't petty revenge. This was a business model, a fraud scheme hiding behind social justice rhetoric. Robert leaned closer. She's been running this play for years. And Scarlett. She's not the first actress Linda's recruited, but she might be the weakest link. What makes you say that? He clicked on Scarlett's latest live stream, replaying a few seconds. She was sitting in her living room trying to look composed, but Robert froze the frame mid-sentence, zooming in on her hands. They trembled like leaves in the wind. That's not fear, he said quietly. That's guilt. I thought back to her last few videos, shorter, less confident comments disabled after people started asking why her timeline didn't add up. She'd posted a vague message earlier. Sometimes doing the right thing feels impossible. She's cracking, Robert continued. If we get to her before Linda does, she could blow this wide open. The idea sounded insane. Scarlett had been the face of my destruction for weeks. But if Robert was right, she might also be my salvation. How? I asked. Pressure breaks people, he said simply, especially when they're in over their heads. We spent the next 2 hours in his truck mapping out a plan like two soldiers preparing for war. Step 1, lock down every digital footprint. Robert taught me tricks even I didn't know, pulling metadata from photos, tracing burner phone purchases, digging through financial records. I compiled everything into a timeline so airtight it could choke. What we uncovered made my blood boil. Payments from HOA accounts labeled as community outreach funneled into personal Venmo transfers. Receipts for professional-grade makeup kits shipped to Linda's address. Emails coaching Scarlett on what to say during police interactions disguised as support resources. This wasn't sloppiness. This was orchestration. But the most damning find came from Robert's law enforcement contacts. A restraining order template identical to mine had been filed in 3 other counties. Same language, same victim statements, different names. It was a script. The implications hit me like a freight train. If we could prove this was systemic fraud, not just a neighborhood spat, it would move beyond local cops. It would go federal. For the first time in weeks, I felt something dangerous stirring inside me, hope. Robert sensed it too. You're not just fighting for your house anymore, he said, his voice low and hard. You're fighting to take down a criminal enterprise. That night back in my motel room, I stared at Scarlett's Instagram, my finger hovering over her latest post, a picture of a sunset with the caption, "Trying to remember who I was before all this." The cracks were widening. If I could just reach her, make her see that Linda wasn't protecting her, only using her, I might have a chance to turn the tide. But Robert was right about something else too. Pressure breaks people. And right now, Scarlett Myers was under more pressure than she'd ever felt in her life. It was time to apply just enough to make her choose which side she really wanted to be on. 2 weeks ago, I was a man begging the system to believe me. Now sitting across from Robert in his cluttered garage with corkboards plastered in timelines and red string, like some crime show cliche, I wasn't begging anymore. I was planning. We'd spent days building an airtight case, financial trails, metadata transaction logs, screenshots of Scarlett's contradictions. Every piece was a nail in Linda's coffin, but we still lacked the silver bullet, the one thing that would make even the most skeptical judge sit up and listen. That's when Scarlett gave it to us. It happened on a Wednesday night. Robert called me at 9:42 p.m., his voice vibrating with urgency. "Turn on your notifications. Now." I opened Instagram and nearly dropped my phone. Scarlett was live. At first it looked like another pity stream, the dim lighting, the quiver in her voice, the background of my living room. But then I heard another voice. Linda's. "Don't forget to look terrified when the cops show up. And for God's sake, stop smiling in your posts. People are starting to question you." Scarlett's hand shot into the frame as she fumbled to end the live, but it was too late. Hundreds of people were already watching. Comments flooded in. "Wait, is she being coached? This sounds fake as hell. What is going on here?" The stream cut, but the damage was done. Robert grinned like a wolf. "Please tell me you screen recorded that." I held up my phone, my heart pounding. Every second. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt power shift. Not much, but enough to ignite something I thought I'd lost control. We weren't done, though. We needed Scarlett to flip completely, and for that, Robert wanted a face-to-face. If she's questioning Linda, she's dangerous to them and to herself. We offer her a way out before Linda silences her. The phrase made my stomach knot. "You think Linda would do whatever it takes?" Robert's eyes were steel. "Absolutely." The next 48 hours were a blur of strategy. Robert played the role of neutral neighbor, striking up casual conversations with Scarlett when she went out for groceries or walked around the lake. He never pushed, never accused, just planted seeds of doubt. "She asked you to sign anything," he'd murmur casually, "because you know false claims can carry serious charges. Just looking out for you." Scarlett didn't answer, but she hesitated, and hesitation was all we needed. Meanwhile, I was piecing together the bigger picture. Using my skills, I hacked not illegally but creatively through public records, tracing Linda's community fund transfers to shell companies. The pattern was undeniable. Every fraud victim followed the same trajectory: accusation, restraining order, forced sale, property flipped at a profit. But the deeper I dug, the sicker I felt. This wasn't just Linda. There were names, dozens. Other HOA presidents in other states. Identical language in legal filings. Same support networks popping up like weeds across 3 counties. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was racketeering. Scarlett's cracks widened. Her posts became erratic, cryptic captions, photos of empty wine glasses, late-night stories where her eyes were red from crying. She was unraveling under the weight of the lie. Then came the call. It was past midnight when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered with a cautious, "Hello." A shaky voice whispered, "Ethan Scarlett." I don't know who else to talk to," she said, words tumbling out like loose bricks. Everything she told me, it's not what I thought. I just wanted to start over. I didn't know it would ruin someone's life. For a second, I didn't trust my own ears. The woman who'd branded me a stalker in front of millions was now confessing in the dark. "Scarlett, listen to me," I said, keeping my voice calm even though my pulse was hammering. "You can fix this, but you have to act fast. Linda's not protecting you, she's using you. And when this blows up, she'll let you take the fall." Silence, then a broken whisper. "What do you need me to do?" I glanced at Robert, who was already pulling a small recorder from his bag. His face was grim. "Tell the truth," I said, "on record." Scarlett agreed to meet us the next day in a quiet diner off Highway 93. She looked nothing like the confident influencer from her videos. Just a woman crushed under the weight of her own choices. When she slid the recorder across the table and said, "I'll testify," I knew everything was about to change. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was fighting back. Scarlett kept her word. The next week, wearing a wire Robert secured through his old contacts, she walked back into Linda's house with the weight of two lives on her shoulders, hers and mine. The recording started with casual chatter. Then Linda's voice dropped into that cold, commanding tone I'd come to know too well. "Stick to the script, Scarlett," she said. "If anyone asks, you're terrified of him. Cry if you have to. Remember, your safety is the priority and the law is on your side. He doesn't stand a chance." My fists clenched as I listened to the live feed from Robert's laptop. Every syllable was a knife in my gut, but I forced myself to stay still. Then came the confession we'd prayed for. "This isn't just about Ethan," Linda continued. "It's about justice. These men hoard property while women suffer. We're leveling the playing field. You think this is the first, sweetheart? I've done this a dozen times, and I'll keep doing it as long as the system lets me." Boom. The silver bullet. Robert gave a sharp nod and sent the signal. Within hours, federal agents swarmed Linda's home. They confiscated her files, devices, and the damning training manuals detailing how to fake domestic violence symptoms convincingly. Scarlett, pale and trembling, handed over everything: bank statements, emails, chat logs. And just like that, the FBI took control. What started as a neighborhood scandal unraveled into a multi-state racketeering case. Turns out Linda was just one branch of a sprawling network of HOA predators, using the same playbook to steal homes across the country. They called it housing justice in their encrypted chats, a sick twist of language to justify lining their pockets. The day I walked into the federal courthouse for Linda's arraignment, the place looked like a movie set. News vans lined up, reporters shoving cameras in my face, Netflix crews filming for a true crime docuseries. Linda strutted in like a martyr, claiming she was the victim of a government conspiracy. She fired her lawyers and represented herself, turning every court session into a circus. But when the prosecution played her own words, "These men hoard property while women suffer," "I've done this a dozen times," the courtroom went silent, except for the sound of her delusions shattering. Scarlett took the stand next, voice shaking, but steady enough to tell the truth. She admitted everything: how Linda lured her in with promises of purpose, how the lies spiraled until she couldn't breathe. "I thought I was helping women," she whispered through tears, "but I was destroying innocent lives." It took the jury less than 6 hours to return guilty on all counts: fraud, conspiracy, racketeering. Judge Harrison gave Linda 35 years with no chance of parole. Her assets, houses, cars, offshore accounts were seized to compensate victims. When the verdict was read, Linda lost it. "You'll regret this," she screamed as marshals cuffed her. "I'm a hero. You're all pawns in a broken system." Her meltdown went viral, of course. Warren Hokaran trended worldwide for 3 days. As for Scarlett, her cooperation earned her immunity. She didn't walk away unscathed, though. The internet branded her a traitor and a fraud. But she didn't hide. Instead, she started volunteering at domestic violence shelters, determined to atone for the harm she caused. And me. 6 months later, I stood on the deck of my cabin, watching the lake shimmer under a summer sun that felt warmer than I remembered. My name was cleared, my reputation restored. The federal government compensated me for damages, and speaking invitations started pouring in from homeowners' rights conferences. I didn't ask for this fight, but maybe that's the point. Sometimes life blindsides you, tears everything apart, and leaves you standing in the rubble with one choice: stay broken or rebuild stronger. I chose the latter. Robert and I started a nonprofit to educate property owners about HOA fraud. Scarlett joined us, speaking openly about manipulation tactics to help others spot red flags before it's too late. The nightmare that almost destroyed me became the catalyst for something bigger, a mission to protect others from the same fate. And as I watched the sun dip behind the pines that evening, I realized something I never thought I'd feel again: peace. Because justice wasn't just served, it was rewritten. If there's one truth I learned from this nightmare, it's this: evil doesn't always come kicking down your door. It often walks in wearing a friendly smile and carrying a plate of cookies. We want to believe our communities are safe, that neighbors have our backs, that laws meant to protect victims can't be twisted into weapons. But trust without vigilance is a gamble you can't afford. What happened to me wasn't just a personal attack. It was a system exploit. Linda didn't need brute force. She used the law, social media, and public sympathy like precision tools to dismantle my life. And for weeks I let it happen because I assumed truth would prevail on its own. It doesn't. Truth needs advocates. Truth needs proof. So here's the lesson. Don't wait for the system to save you. Document everything. Question authority when something feels off. And if the world decides you're guilty before you speak, don't surrender. Fight smart. Fight relentlessly. Because the line between victim and survivor is drawn by the choices you make when everything seems lost. Here's what you can do to protect yourself. Secure documentation. Keep digital and physical copies of deeds, leases, and utility accounts in multiple locations. 2. Travel safeguards. Notify trusted contacts when you're away for extended periods. Consider home monitoring systems with off-site backups. 3. Community transparency. Attend HOA meetings, review budgets, and ask questions. Corruption thrives in silence. 4. Digital awareness. Monitor local social media groups. Disinformation spreads fast, stay ahead of it. 5. Legal preparedness. Have a lawyer on standby or know where to find affordable legal aid before a crisis hits. You can't control bad actors, but you can control your readiness. Protect your property, protect your name, and never assume it can't happen to me, because it can, and when it does, you'll wish you prepared yesterday.